Joining us now, former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst Glenn Kirshner. Also with us, NBC's Gary Grumbach, who has been in the overflow room inside the courthouse since testimony began. So what are we looking for this week? And is it possible, if not this week, then at some point we're going to see Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal?
Well, I think this week we're really starting to look for the connective tissue here, the connecting the dots of everything we heard last week, which was David Pecker talking about the catch and kill scheme, Rona Graff talking about how Stormy Daniels' name and Karen McDougal's names were in the Trump Organization contact list. And then at the very end of the day on Friday, we just started to get an introduction into the banker, Gary Farrow, who is going to be able to provide the money trail of a little bit in terms of the opening of the shell company bank account that Michael Cohen used for the $130,000 hush money payment. As in terms of what we're going to see this upcoming week, we'll see perhaps Stormy Daniels, perhaps Karen McDougal, but I think that some of the most important testimony may come from the people who witnessed everything as it relates to this transaction. And talking about Madeleine Westerhout, one of the executive assistants that followed him to the White House, some of the folks in the financial field that can speak to what exactly is the illegality with the falsification of business records.
When you talk, Glenn, about those kinds of folks taking the witness stand, for the legal profession, and maybe even the jurors to some extent, it's interesting, right? It starts to fill in the blank. It starts to connect the pieces of the puzzle. There is a whole different thing if Stormy Daniels walks into that courtroom, if Karen McDougal walks into that courtroom. What is their legal importance to this case potentially? And is it possible they won't testify, do you think?
You know, I think they will, Chris, and undoubtedly they're going to bring the drama. They're going to bring the intense interest and perhaps some salaciousness to the jury's attention. They're really important witnesses, and folks, you know, shouldn't forget that prosecutors put lots of witnesses on who aren't blockbuster witnesses or who don't necessarily produce some of the most directly incriminating evidence against the defendant, but they are all part of the story, kind of the criminal tapestry that the prosecutors are trying to weave here. And here's where I think the Karen McDougals and the Stormy Daniels are going to be real danger zones for Donald Trump. As best I can tell, Donald Trump and his lawyers have never conceded that Donald Trump had a relationship with either woman. The closest the defense attorneys came, Todd Blanche, in opening statements, he said, ladies and gentlemen, Stormy Daniels' testimony doesn't mean anything. It's not important. That's a sign that he believes it's probably potentially really damaging because he's already trying to steer the jurors away from her testimony. But it is important because if the jury comes to believe that Donald Trump, in fact, had this somewhat long-term relationship with Karen McDougal and this one encounter or a short-term relationship with Stormy Daniels, it will paint a picture of a defendant whose stock in trade is concealment and deception and lying. It may not be directly relevant to the falsifying business records charges to gain unfair advantage in the 2016 election, but it will still do potentially real serious damage to Donald Trump in the eyes of the jurors.
I want to get your take on something that Financial Times U.S. national editor Edward Luce said earlier this morning on Morning Joe, and he talked about the toll that all of this is taking on Donald Trump.
The final impact of this trial is just the psychological effect on Trump, sitting there without his cell phone, being told to sit down, you know, practically having to ask for a bathroom break, and awaiting Stormy Daniels, the scenario of his nightmare, testifying in front of him.
How does a defense and, frankly, a prosecution lawyer deal with what you see in the defendant, and how might that impact the trial as the jury watches very closely?
Yeah, you know, the jurors will pick up on everything that goes on in that courtroom, and much of it is nonverbal. They are absorbing important information about the defendant, Donald Trump, in the way he behaves in court, in how he reacts, even if not verbally, to what the witnesses are saying about evidence that may be deeply incriminating. And I'll tell you, Chris, the defendants that I prosecuted, I saw it wear on them, wear on their family members. I've always said there are no winners in criminal trials. You know, accountability is a must, and justice must be done, particularly to vindicate the rights of the victims. But, you know, it can tend to wear on everybody, sometimes no more than the defendant himself. And let's face it, we have a contempt hearing coming up where it may go from bad to worse, because the minute Judge Merchan holds Donald Trump in criminal contempt in violation of the laws of New York, that will represent a violation of his release conditions in all 4 of his criminal cases. So I think things are about to actually get significantly worse for Donald Trump.
The trial resumes tomorrow morning. Glenn Kirshner, Gary Grumbach, thank you both.